So we are going to move into assessment now. So again, thinking in terms of backward design, we need some mechanism to know if we have actually reached that desired outcome that we identified at the beginning. So this is all about how do we as facilitators, as mentors, as teachers know that folks have developed, and how do they know, how can they see their own development and progress? So the obvious thing to start with, because we are aligned with the AAC&U value rubrics in this series, is of course the Intercultural Knowledge and Competence Value rubric. And the most common way that I have seen this rubric applied is either as a whole, or in this case, piecemeal. If you're just focusing on openness, you can take that one row from the rubric and you can use it to evaluate learning artifacts. So it's most commonly done, in my experience, with written assignments such as reflective journals or maybe discussion posts or some kind of paper. And the nice thing about something like this is that you don't actually have to assign credit for it. You can assess without evaluating for a grade. So this is an example of a rubric that I pulled from a Brightspace course. You could put it in Canvas or Moodle or whatever learning platform that you happen to use if you do, in fact, evaluate learners online. And so this just shows you that you can grade based on something like the quality of the submission, or whether it was turned in on time, or whether it meets the sort of intent of the assignment, whether they treated it thoroughly and thoughtfully, and give points for that. But you can also score on the rubric without assigning any points. And that allows you to give learners feedback without making their grade dependent on where they are on that rubric. So you see here the AAC&U value rubric for openness is here, but also the intercultural development continuum it would be another way to give feedback in that way. But there are two other ways that I've seen the rubrics used and used myself, and I think I just want to mention as options for you. So this is a lot less common, but I think it can be a useful tool for observational feedback. So you could have a dialogue. You could use Five Nosy Questions. You could use any of these other dialogue type tools that we introduced today, and then use the rubric to either provide feedback on what you observed, or as a number three, have the learners use the rubric as a self-evaluative tool so that they can plot themselves based on their experience there. And you can do it as a self-evaluation tool, or even as an observation or a written reflection overlay on top of assignments. You can do that either cross-sectionally, just at one point in time, or you can do it longitudinally, so that you might do it as a formative assessment at the beginning of an experience, maybe even several times throughout an extended, longer-term experience, and then maybe at the end, where people can really see their trajectory of growth over that series of assignments. Okay, so we're going to present a few other options beyond the AAC&U value rubric for assessment for you. And as we present these, just as a sort of outline or summary of our main points, we want to be sure that folks understand that technology is a beautiful gift to be used. So I think Horane, you're on for this section.
Sure. I'll just run through these briefly because I want to make sure we have enough time for questions that are popping up in the chat. So when thinking about the formative assessments, these are assessments that we have designed, that others have developed, that really help to track progress throughout. So it's not fully summative in the sense that, okay, you get you'll be necessarily evaluated on this and this will be your final score, but it's an opportunity to facilitate reflection. And as Kris mentioned, using Qualtrics or SurveyMonkey or different ones, we'll demonstrate a few. And we want you to think about this because we don't want you to recreate the wheel. I've been down that road before and I was like, oh, I could just look this up and see someone has done something like this. The other piece is automated feedback. The ones we're going to share with you, they're already built within Qualtrics is the one we use, and you'll have access to it to download it, and we can share copies with you. but it's already built an automated feedback to learners to facilitate their reflections, and you could actually go in and modify those things. So we're going to give you 3 examples of this. You can go to the next slide, Kris. So the first one is the Ask Short skill. So myself, Heidi Parker-Rushan, this call, and Chuck Callahan, while I was at Purdue, we developed this tool called the Attitude, Skills, and Knowledge Short Skills. It's based on the Intercultural Knowledge and Competence value rubric. And we intentionally just took statements from the value rubric at the benchmark level and the highest level, and transform them into statements that students could reflect on. What you're seeing here is what we call the construct key. So we design statements for the whole rubric, not just openness, all the attitude, skills, and knowledge that are there. You could bring in the other one. So these links here show directly to the HubICL, where you can find the tool, and then also the tiny URL link. If you type that into your web browser, it will take you directly to the assessment itself. Below are just some screenshots. These assessments are not, we didn't sort of design them in a way with checking for social desirability. So what you might find is, for example, on the first statement, I welcome and initiate interactions with people who are culturally different, which is one of the items related to openness. Someone might feel like, oh, sure I am. And that's what they think or aspire to be, but not what they actually, that's not their particular approach. So with how we have designed this is to have prompts that prepare students to take the assessment. So they have to read through that first part. There's a screenshot of welcome, inviting them to read through the page before. And then they entered their information to get the automated email at the end. So that's set up. And then the way I've designed this one is, when are they completing the assessment? So instead of creating 3 different links for the pre, the retrospect, the post, when they're doing it, you would have one link that you give to them, and they'd select the time, and it's designed to walk them through the process already, just depending on when they're completing the assessment. But this is great for you in determining your own goals for student learning, because all the constructs are there, the attitudes, as well as them monitoring their own learning. This is a screenshot of what they get in their emails once it's completed, just a brief narrative about the skill, where their responses place them, and then some reflection questions. These you can modify. And I put in where at the end, so download as a PDF with Qualtrics, you can just have them upload that to the system instead of you having them forward you all the emails. You can click again, Kris. Yes. So as you said, we're happy to share these with you. Just send an email to me, holgate@nd.edu, and it's also on the slides. You'll have access to that. And we could share. These links here just tell you how to access the survey once you have shared it. Make a copy for yourself so that you could go and play with it and use it in your class.
So I'm going to very briefly talk about 2 other options. All 3 of these, the asks, the MGoods, and the tolerance for ambiguity scale, are open access, so you don't have to pay to use them. And so that's a great advantage. They're also fairly short, so it's not going to take you hours, to do the assessment each time. It's more like 10 minutes. And the one difference that I wanted to point out between the AAC&U value rubrics and these 3 scales that we're talking about is that the AAC&U value rubrics also open access and free to use. But with the value rubrics, there's an emphasis on potentially adapting them to your context. Whereas with these 3 scales that we're introducing, they're validated statistically. So you don't want to change items on them. So if you copy something, one of these for your own use, you can change demographics, you can change the introductory language or the automated feedback to your learners, but don't change the items themselves, because it's been statistically sort of tested to make sure it's actually measuring what it is and that the items make sense and are doing a good job as a survey. Okay, so the MGoods is the Meville-Guzman Universality Diversity Short Scale, which is why we always say MGoods. And it also is in Qualtrics. There's a copy there that we're happy to share with you, and then you can copy it and use it for yourself if you have a Qualtrics account. And I just put a couple of sample items up here from it. It doesn't say openness in the title, but I would argue very strongly that openness is one of the constructs that it is measuring. So you can see that kind of from the items here. It's less in the suspending judgment piece and more in the willingness to interact across differences, definitely. And then the last one is the tolerance for ambiguity scale. This has been around for a while as well, a couple of decades, and it's different from the other two because the other two are a little bit broader. The asks and the M-goods have several constructs involved in them, whereas the tolerance for ambiguity scale is very, very specific on this one very clearly delineated concept of tolerance for ambiguity. This is just an example from the feedback email, and I put it up here because I wanted people to see that one of the values of doing formative assessment like this is to encourage reflection on the part of the learners. And so you can give them their score on a survey like this and then use it as an assignment for them to think deeply about what the survey says about them and how they feel about it and why they think they got that score and what they want to do about it. So it can be a really useful teaching tool as formative assessment.